As technologies progressed in the 20th century, new devices and platforms of communication entered the mainstream. The media transformed from partisan propaganda to a business model to close enough impartial reporting. This transition, however, also presented governments with new instruments to shape yellow journalism to deliberately mislead audiences. My name is Shirvan and welcome to Caspian Report. At the turn of the 20th century, the new mass markets introduced new structures that led to mass production and consumption. As financial industries transformed, increased freedom of expression led to new business plans in the media. Initially, newspaper editors realized that the human craving for drama could be sustained by sending reporters to police stations and courts with the goal to write true crime stories. The first of these newspapers was the New York Times, which in 1896 had been purchased by a wealthy investor by the name of Adolph Ox. The new owner hired reporters to cover local financial and political scenes and encouraged the staff to research facts and sources, but also to treat data with skepticism. The overall idea was to provide reliable news and not to tell readers what is fact and what is false. This business plan built mutual trust between local, state, and national reporters as well as the American public. It was such a success that the circulation of the New York Times increased from 9,000 in 1896 to 780,000 in the 1920s. Before long, other newspapers emulated the business model of the New York Times, which enabled fact-based journalism to dominate the industry. An example of such investigative reporting was Upton Sinclair's exposure of the unsanitary practices of the American meatpacking industry. Another pioneer was Ida Tarbell, who exposed the shady dealings of John Rockefeller in the oil industry. Both stories combined sensationalism with accuracy and led to legislative reforms. In the aftermath of World War I, commercial radio broadcasting entered the mass medium. It became an important instrument for news and entertainment, but it also prompted a new field of mass communication theories. One of the earlier concepts, called the hypodermic needle theory, was formulated by Harold Laswell in 1927. It claims that messages and broadcasts are injected directly into the conscious of passive audiences. To test this thesis, in 1938, filmmaker Orson Welles released an episode of radio drama that was based on the novel The War of the Worlds.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place tonight at Grover Mills has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times.
Basically, the news bulletins described a devastating alien invasion. The following day, most newspapers reported of mass panic across the United States. The true impact, however, was relatively small. The whole ordeal was an unusual case of false reporting on false news, and it invalidated the hypodermic needle theory. Nevertheless, the fake news concerning the impact of the radio drama pushed the hypodermic needle theory to the forefront. Large segments of societies came to believe in the all-powerful influence of the media, which is an idea that has continued to this day. In modern times, however, Laswell's theory is no longer acknowledged, because it does not differentiate between individuals and suggests that humans respond to media messages the same way. Yet this hasn't stopped some groups from exploiting the public perception of the all-powerful media by putting forth claims such as that violent films and video games stimulate violent behavior. In any case, as the concept of the hypodermic needle proved to be inadequate, new communication theories emerged. In 1944, Paul Lazarsfeld introduced the two-step flow of communication model, which recognized that humans are individuals who take part in a society and therefore their interpretation of the news is influenced by other people, who in turn are influenced by the mass media. Unlike the linear hypodermic needle theory, Lazar's field two-step flow communication clarified that people are more susceptible to the thoughts of opinion leaders than mass media. These opinion leaders are usually skeptical people who pay close attention to the events depicted in the media and pass on their findings to people in their surroundings. In 2011, Twitter revealed that about half the information that originated from mainstream sources was indirectly passed on to audiences by intermediate layers of opinion leaders. At the same time, these opinion leaders, who were classified as ordinary users, were more connected and more exposed to the media than their followers. In essence, this experience shows how communication works. But a more relatable example is word-of-mouth advertising. People are more likely to purchase items that are endorsed by someone they trust rather than from abstract commercials, and the same principle applies to the consumption of news. In the 1950s, the television set had entered the mainstream and propelled additional theories on mass communication. The first idea, known as the reinforcement theory, describes how people seek out and remember information that supports their pre-existing attitudes and beliefs. So while most people claim to search for the truth, people feel uncomfortable when their beliefs are challenged. As a result, people tend to follow opinion leaders who confirm their own assumptions. In 2017, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science studied the flow of 500,000 tweets on controversial topics. The study showed that passionate tweets usually tend to be retweeted within political clusters. The research group published a graphic of their findings that depicted blue liberal and red conservative retweets. Although the graphic shows that there is some interaction between the two camps, most of the communication remains within the respective clusters. The study not only confirms the reinforcement theory, but also reveals the extent it has polarized the political landscape, and this process is further accelerated by modern algorithms that are active in social media platforms, but we will go over this topic in the next report. The final theory of mass communication worth considering was introduced in 1972. The theory of agenda setting supported the earlier ideas that mass media could not shape human opinion, but it added that media exposure could determine the topics we talk about in our daily lives. The theory explains how trending topics, think of immigration and security, can influence our daily conversations, even if it has nothing to do with our immediate surroundings. This also means that too much exposure to mass media can shape our perception of reality. For instance, if a certain topic is frequently repeated on Fox News, while a different subject is repeated on NPR, the respective audiences will develop different priorities. These theories on mass communication help us to understand how the mainstream media functions, but where the media fails is explained by what is known as media representation. The fact of the matter is that every media outlet is only a segment of the whole truth. For instance, before a photo is published, the editor has selected a scene, omitted some of the context, and made a decision on the angle of the footage. All these constructions influence the narrative and how audiences will interpret the final product. The unavoidable bias of the editor implies that complete objective journalism does not exist and has never existed. The best a reporter can do is represent the truth close enough, so a healthy degree of skepticism has always been necessary. By the 1960s, reporters increasingly subscribed to the guiding principles of the journalistic codes of ethics, which, among many things, emphasized the importance of sources. The quality of content still varied as some reporters and media firms were more reliable than others, but overall there was genuine interest in accuracy within context. It is during this era that modern media emerged, and yellow journalism took a backseat. That being said, in the realm of political journalism, little had changed. Unlike domestic stories which could be investigated independently, Information regarding foreign politics was nearly exclusively reliant on government sources, so while domestic news improved in accuracy, the absence of independent journalism in the political domain allowed for government officials to continue to insert false stories into the mainstream media. Some examples of government-sponsored fake stories include the missile gap, the naval incident in the Gulf of Tonkin, the body counts in Vietnam, and many others. A more recent example can be traced to President Bush when he outright deceived the international community to invade and destroy the government in Iraq. The end result was a series of catastrophic conflicts that is still raging on. Similar false flags and fabricated stories are abundant throughout the 20th century, but they are not exclusive to the United States. During the Cold War, Soviet intelligence agencies would forge items, documents, and letters and plant these false stories in foreign newspapers to discredit the Americans. An example of this method occurred in 1979 when the KGB planted a source in a Pakistani newspaper that supposedly proved that the United States had orchestrated the capture of the Grand Mosque in Mecca. The false story led to widespread anti-American attitudes throughout the Middle East and even resulted in the looting and burning of the US Embassy in Islamabad. In essence, during the Cold War, Moscow and Washington undermined one another by using fake news. As the rivalry between the two has reignited in modern times, yellow journalism, due to the advent of web-generated news, has once again become a powerful force. But we will discuss more on this topic in the next report. For now, this was a Caspian report by me, Shirvan. Special thanks to our contributors on Patreon for giving us the resources to produce content like this. For more information on our crowdfunding platform, visit patreon.com/Caspian report. All the funds will help to keep our channel independent and self-sustained. In any case, thank you for your time and Sarol.